I know it's been a while since we've actually had carnage on the channel. Yes, we've still torn down plenty of bad engines, but we haven't had anything with an inspection port so big that I can almost crawl inside of this engine. Today we're going to tear down this 3.8 liter pushrod V6 out of a JK Wrangler. This is out of a 2007 with 78 or 74,000 miles, I forget which. And it's quite astonishing that something with such low miles just blows up. And what's funny too is the owner of this Jeep that the engine came out of said he didn't hear anything. He just noticed a slight loss of power and he pulled over, and a passerby told him that it had an oil leak and it was leaking oil badly. Well, yes, can confirm. In 2007, Jeep rolled out the JK platform of Wrangler. It's an all-new Wrangler at the time. Gone were the engine options from the TJ. The 4-liter that everyone still adores to this day was no longer an option. Instead, you got this, a 3.8-liter V6 borrowed right out of a minivan. What were they thinking? Well, I think they did this for two reasons. One is that the 4-liter was having trouble passing emissions that were getting stricter and stricter at the time. And two, for crash reasons, a big inline-6 in the front of the engine can pose a problem, whereas this is a very compact V6. The good news here, though, is that this makes 7 or 8 horsepower more than the 4-liter did in its final years. And I guess that's not really great news considering the JK is a lot heavier than the TJ. But there is a silver lining here. As good as the 4-liters were, and believe me, I'm a huge fan of the 4-liters, these are also really good engines. I'm not telling you that they can never blow up. 4-liters blow up too. But I've seen these engines with 600 or 700,000 miles in taxis. And if you own a JK Wrangler and you find yourself needing one of these 3.8-liter V6s, you can literally buy one out of a minivan. All you need to do is swap the timing cover, upper and lower oil pan, and a few things on the top of the engine, and bam, you got yourself a cheap engine for an expensive vehicle, whereas if you go to buy an engine right out of a Wrangler, you're going to pay at least 3 times as much. Now this engine has low miles. It was provided courtesy of Premier Automotive in Godfrey, Illinois. They provide us with a lot of cores here on the channel. And in fact, the owner of that shop has his own YouTube channel restoring small tractors and lawn equipment. It's pretty cool. I'm going to leave a link to that in the video description. But on to this, I just got to show you. It's bad. So this is the brand new inspection port installed on the side of this low mileage 3.8-liter V6. It actually destroyed the starter too. The starter's mounted right in this location. It put a huge dent in the side of the starter, and when the guy shut the engine off, it would never restart because the starter was destroyed. So, unfortunately, I don't have that to show you because he had to turn that back in for a core. That rebuild place is going to be pissed. Clearly, the first thing that you want to do when you have an engine that has a giant hole in it is see if it turns over. That's what I want to do. Oh yeah, it's got good compression. There's nothing wrong with this if you don't look at it. This feels great. Let's see if there's any Uncle Rodney's loose in there. It's fine, guys. The next thing I want to do is pull the spark plugs. That doesn't feel good. It's fine. That's great. Well, there's good and bad here, literally. Look at the size of the gap on that plug on the left. And then as you get towards the back of the engine, well, that one looks like the piston has regapped it to its liking. That's probably the cylinder that generated the giant inspection port. The rest of these just look like they have needed to be replaced for quite some time. Next, we're going to work on this EGR pipe. And now the upper plenum. Get this map sensor disconnected. This should just lift it right off. Now we have some harness to contend with. Let me get my harness tool. And the harness is off. All right, now the lower intake manifold. Now it should just lift straight up. But I left the bolts in it. Really only need to get them off of one side, I think. Yes. While we're here, we'll get this little valley intake gasket removed. We didn't need those. Let's take a look at these intake ports. That one looks pretty good. That one looks pretty good. Even that one looks good. I don't see any issues on the other side either. Everything looks good. Now let's see if we can get this exhaust manifold off. I got the big battery on it now, but man, this thing's been having trouble with connections inside of it. Still does the job. Onto the other side. Oh, there's a thing. A thing is holding this thing on. Don't worry, I got the tool for that. Let's take a look at these exhaust valves. That looks good. That looks good. I don't see any issues there. So far, so good. That one's partially open, but I don't see a problem. Now, we'll pull the passenger side or right side valve cover. What the heck is going on here? Well, it doesn't like, this socket doesn't like the studs. I've got a slightly better socket. Blue, I need you. Oh, wow. That's clean. I don't usually say that, but that's clean. Look how clean this thing is. I don't see any forbidden glitter. Everything seems to be where it's supposed to be. That was a little off. That's fine. Let's go to the other side. And what's behind door number 2? Well, this just looks really good in here. I don't really see any problems. I suppose now it's time to take the valve train out, take the rocker arms and the push rods out. Came off without a hitch. Look at them itty bitty push rods. They look small when you're used to working on LS's. They all look good. So all the rocker pads look good. Sockets on the arms look good. All of the push rod ends have a mirror finish, which indicates that they're well oiled, so that's good. This looks great so far. On to the other side. Oh no. These all look good. Very similar story on this side. I don't really see any cause for concern here. This all looks really good. Might be a little bit more wear in that rocker bucket, but it looks fine. Now it's time to pull the head bolts out. We'll start with the right hand bank. Oh. As I was cracking those head bolts loose, I glanced over at the other side because sometimes you can tell that valves are bent by how high they sit. And as you can see, that last valve sits a little bit lower than its neighbor. So I suspect we're going to have some problems in that combustion chamber. Perhaps some malice? We'll see. Now we'll zip these bolts out. This should just lift right off. Oh, we're leaking coolant. I didn't get a pan. All right, now I got a bucket. I'll get the head gasket off so I can finish. There's the head gasket. I don't see any flaws there. Looks great. Let's take a look at these cylinder walls and pistons. So it looks pretty good so far. I don't see any major damage. I don't see any signs that these pistons hit the cylinder head. There's a little bit of vertical wear, but it's not terrible from what we can see so far. And the cylinder head looks pretty good too. I don't see any cracks. I don't see any damage. I don't know if these are known for cracking. I have seen several of these engines with blown head gaskets, but I don't see any damage here. Now, our test. Like a rock. Wait, that's a Chevrolet. On to the left-hand side. Let's get these head bolts out. And off with its head. Well, let's take a look at the head gasket. Oh, I see problems. Not that we expected none. Head gasket looks good. Yeah, decent. So this thing starts out pretty good. Piston looks good. Cylinder 2. Bores look good. Cylinder 3, not good. Those are valve impact marks on that piston, and it looks like that piston is cracked right at the crown. So I would wager we have what is known in the industry as a disconnecting rod. But before we do our test, let's go look at the cylinder head. Same story on this head. Looks good. Looks good. And there's that bent valve. Looks like an exhaust valve has been bent, and the combustion chamber was definitely hit by the piston. Whether this head is usable or not, that will be determined once we get the valve out. We'll do that later in the video. It doesn't look like there's a ton of damage to the head, and it may be repairable with just one valve. Time for the test. Good. A little loud, but I still think it's connected. I don't think there's a rod there anymore. In fact, if there was, I would be really surprised. I can even push this back up in the board. We're just going to leave that. We're just going to forget that we saw that. So here's a better look at the bore now that that piston has traveled down. And we have some sparkles. That's not good. It's not where sparkles go. A little bit of aluminum transfer. We knew it was going to be wrecked. Cross hatching is still quite present. Next, I'm going to pull the lifters and this piece. The lifter holder downer. One thing that works really good at grabbing lifters are these transmission pliers. Apparently not. So here's the lifters out of this engine. They all look like they're in excellent condition. Some of them have a little bit of wear on the side. But I was looking at these, I'm like, man, you know, these look really familiar. Let's just grab an LS truck lifter. Weird. Who would have known? It's the same. I mean, maybe there's some different specs. But that's pretty crazy. Same dimensions. LS truck and a 3.8 Chrysler. Who would have known? Okay, so they are a little different. Will they interchange though? Now we'll get the oil filter off. Some oil coming out. Doesn't look particularly sparkly. We'll get that cut open and looked at in just a few minutes when we get a little further. Next, the water pump pulley. All right, and now the water pump. Look at this thing. Ew, it's got crusties in there. That's fine now. It looks like an original water pump. It's got a Chrysler part number on it. I don't really see any date stamps on it. It spins nice. Coolant smells terrible. Most coolant does smell terrible, actually. It's a good water pump. Next, the crank pulley. Powering down. Well, I had to dismantle my puller to get the feet in there because of the shape of them. So they're just a little too big to fit through the opening. But it still worked. Let's continuing on the front cover. Before I go any further, I think to get the timing cover off, I need to remove the oil pans. And I could be wrong, but I don't want to go prying on that timing cover. It's a really expensive part. So we're going to make sure it's drained of oil, and we'll flip it over a little bit. I'm sure it's drained. Only drained engines come into the shop. That's a joke. Hey, oil's not supposed to be silver. That's silver. It's bearing infused. I'm going to rotate this thing just a little so I have better access to the oil pan bolts. I feel like there's loose stuff in the oil pan, so I'm not going to go all the way upside down because otherwise I'll be fishing parts of the engine out of the engine all evening. Set this pan here. Actually, we're going to pull it from this side. I don't know why. I think you guys want to look at the giant hole in the block. What has happened here? My battery has kaputted. Okay, so that died. Those big batteries pack a lot more punch than these little ones, but man, do they break. I think I got them all. Oh, there's definitely some prizes in this party pan. Oh, I dropped a piece of block. No, that was upper oil pan. Oh, there's some stuff in here. Ooh, that's not good. Oh, we're puking oil. Forgot to put the drain plug back in the oil pan. I had major concerns that with the size of the hole in the side of this engine, we wouldn't see any carnage in the oil pan because it would have launched everything outside of the block. But, yeah, no, that's not really what happened here. There's a lot of stuff to sort through in here. That's not good at all. Obviously, you can see that the wrist pin appears to be in perfect condition with some silvery oil. Wait, is this damaged? Guys, I think this is damaged. It's always a Chrysler. It literally is. It's always a Chrysler product with a bad wrist pin. That's not reusable. That looks like part of the girdle or the upper oil pan. There's a small end of the rod. The hammer side, as they say. There's a rod bolt. There's the remnants of a rod cap. Hey, there's the other part of the rod cap. The rest of this looks like piston. Oh, hey, there's more rod. Yeah, that's definitely, this is mostly piston an upper oil pan, and lots of bearing foil in here. And look at this. That's just, it's like what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a site of scattered, a debris field. That's the word. Oh, hey, look. That just needs straightened out. It's ready to go back in. All right, I'm going to get all the big pieces of this oil pan out and get them cleaned up so that we can have a look. Here is what we've got. These are the larger pieces that came out of the pan. Obviously, that's connecting rod. There's a connecting rod bolt. There's the hammer end of the connecting rod, another section, and another section. Now you can kind of start to put together what happened here. This goes, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. This goes over here. That goes over there, like so. And that's what we're left with from the rod. I think that might be a section of rod too. Which section? I couldn't tell you. Oh, there's the other rod bolt. The most astonishing thing about all this is the wrist pin, guys. It did not survive. It's ovalized, mainly from one impact right there. Look at that. How can you not hear a wrist pin being bludgeoned to death? I don't understand. Didn't hear a thing, just lost power. Okay. Tons of overheated bearing material and foil. It just reeks of oil starvation. Here's what's in the oil pan. Look at that anti-seize in there. This is the chunky anti-seize. This thing was shredding itself, and then it finally let go. Now the big reveal, let's turn this engine over. I'll leak all the coolant out. Oh, that's hurt. That's hurt pretty bad, actually. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. The oil pickup is not a good place to store your bearing foil. This thing, I wouldn't call it loaded, but I guarantee you once we get this off, we're going to be able to shake a lot of bearing out of that. And as you can see, the hole in the side of the block is not the only hole in this engine. The upper oil pan has taken a huge beating. That one long piece we found, I think that goes right here. That's scrap now. But the rest of this doesn't look too bad yet. So now it's time to pull the upper oil pan. We'll zip these bolts out and get to it. Will this come off easily? Oh yes. Not really a fight at all. Well, several impact marks. That is clean cast scrap now. Next we'll get the pickup tube removed. The O-ring looks semi-decent. It's not split or broken or flat. So how much bearing can you store in a pickup tube? Well, we're still coming, folks. I think we're good. So that is quite a lot. And when there's this much bearing material in the pickup, it tells me that the level of oil was at least up to this level. That means it had enough oil to get to this level for this floating material, which it doesn't stay suspended forever, but it does when it's circulating to get sucked up into the sump. Now it's time to carefully remove the timing cover. Actually, I think we need to take the oil pan gasket off first. Oh, hey, that's got a piece of block still attached. That's neat. We'll just hang that right there. And there's the timing cover. That's a weighty one. We'll pull this oil pump apart here in a moment. The timing system on these is super simple. There's really just stretching the chain. I don't know if that's good or bad. Doesn't really feel like there's a ton of play in the links. Let's get that bolt zipped out. And there's the timing system. Look how simple this is. Now we'll hold the cam retaining plate off. See if this will just come right out. We got some bad stuff already. As soon as this cam came out of the block, that first lobe, I wish I could say I was surprised, but Chrysler has made some pretty soft cams. I didn't know if the 3.8 was one of them. In this case, the material on the cam likely is softer than the roller, or the bearing roller stopped spinning, which I didn't feel any of those that were that bad. So maybe somebody put lifters in it at some point. The rest of these, I wouldn't call them great, but they're not coming apart like that first lobe. And I don't really see any impact marks like I got in a fight with a connecting rod or a piston. Oh well, off to the scrap bin. Let's see how this rotating assembly rotates. Oh, that's not good. The journal has some slight modifications. So you can definitely tell that's where the war was waged. And then look at the counterbalance. That is one of the most chewed up counterweights we've seen on a crankshaft. And it is beat everywhere. There's even some marks on its neighbor. Stuff. All right, now we're going to get the first two rods and pistons out, and we'll work our way from front to back.
The clean way.
Okay, let's see how hard it is to get the rod and piston out of this. Well, it seems to have reached a point and stopped, so let's just push it through. Now number two. I'm just going to pretend I didn't see that happen. On to the next pair. Oh, this one seems to have been modified. Uh-oh. We got problems. So those bearing shells have spun. There's the seam right there. Let's get this rod and piston out. And then there was one. That one looks spun, but I can't see the seam. Yeah, the seam was in the right spot. One shell came off with the connecting rod. Before we tackle these main caps, let's get this rear main seal plate. What's interesting, and we've seen this on other engines, is that only the center main caps have side bolts on them. And the final 8 bolts. I'm just going to give it a little tap. I thought that was going to help, but that helped. Oh, now what did I do? What has happened? And next, or last, or I guess not last because we still have a piston left in it, let's pull the crankshaft. So we still have the remains of the final piston, which I can see the oil control rings from here, so it may be that it falls apart when it comes out of the bore. I'll do my best to preserve it. Well, we have a couple bearings to pull off the crank. I think they come off pretty easily here. I'm glad this isn't really fighting me too bad. They weren't welded or anything, just stuck. Well, unfortunately, I have been banished from the chop saw. I can't really put my finger on why. Exactly what I wanted to do. Nope, that was bad. But here is the oil filter, and there's the oil. It's like a terrible nail polish bass boat paint, oil flavored. And this is just glistening. I don't know if it really shows up well on camera, but this just, if I shined a flashlight directly at this, I'd be blind. It's so sparkly. It's just laden with metal bits. I could scrap this for money. There's so much metal in it. Next up, the rod bearings. You know, starts out pretty good. Looks decent. A little bit of wear, not terrible. Uh-oh. We've got problems, cylinder 3. They're getting worse in cylinder 4. It's delaminating. Oh, cylinder 5, it's not looking good. And cylinder 6 is filleted. Reynolds bearing foil should not look like that. The rods and pistons look pretty decent. At least they start out that way. Not a ton of skirt wear. Rods look good. Next cylinder, little bit of damage there, but really, I would reuse these, no problem. Rings all look good. Uh-oh, cylinder 3, more vertical scratches than the previous. I think you can start to notice a trend here. Cylinder 4, more wear. Rings look good. Cylinder 5, though, heavier wear. Not as bad as you'd think for its neighbor blown up, but several marks on the rod cap and lots of marks on that rod. That has been compromised. And then cylinder 6, I've done my best to show you an exploded view of what it would look like. Here's our small end. There's our damaged wrist pin, RIP. That's all rod chunks. And yes, we are missing a lot of this. I think those are somewhere on the freeway, or hopefully not in somebody's tire. Here's the remnants of the piston. It broke the crown. You can definitely tell this thing smacked the cylinder head really hard. And that happens when the bearing deletes itself. It allows the rod and piston to travel further in the combustion chamber or in the bore and smack the combustion chamber. And that's ultimately what likely shattered that piston. The block, busted, very busted. This is about 100 pounds, probably 120 pounds worth of, probably not that heavy. I don't know. But it is scrap. And at just shy of $200 a ton, it's worth a little bit of money. Some pretty deep impact marks. Next is pull this oil pump apart. I really hope there's not a lot of damage in here because this timing cover is really expensive. You don't want to do that for me? My battery is very dead. Let's try my big battery and see if that can do it. Hey, look at that. Let's see if it stays together long enough to get the rest of these out. Please be good. I don't love what I'm seeing. Yes? No? It's got some gritty stuff in here, so that's not great. It's get it cleaned up. Well, there's a little bit of wear on the outer housing and a little bit of wear on the actual timing cover. It's not terrible. Definitely nothing that would affect oil pressure. But the gears, that side doesn't look too bad. Look how thin these are. That side's got a bit of wear. Now, will this affect the value of this part or the functionality of this part? I don't know. Can you buy new gears for the oil pump? Maybe. I mean, it's a Chrysler, so maybe. They're not super deep. It just looks bad on camera. What do you guys think? Yay or nay? Last thing I want to do is pull this bent valve out. We're going to do this the right way with a hammer and a socket. Usually it only takes one hit. Come on now. I think I got a little more than I bargained for. It's fine, the job's done. Yeah, that's bent. To better display what a really bent valve looks like. Yep, there's no straightening that one. So, how did this engine blow up? What caused this level of catastrophe? Well, I think we can all agree that this engine appears to have been maintained, at least as far as oil changes were concerned. There was not a ton of varnish in the cylinder heads. The valve train all looked really good. The lifters looked good. The push rods looked good. Looked like everything was well lubricated. But we got down to the camshaft, and one of the cam lobes had deteriorated, which is kind of what Chrysler engines do from this era. I'm not saying they all do this, but we've torn down several Hemi engines in the past, and now this 3.8, where it had 1 or 2 or 7 bad cam lobes. I think it's a softer material that they made the cams out of. Maybe they weren't hardened correctly. I don't know the entire situation there. I just know that it's kind of what they're known for. But was that missing material enough to wreck this entire engine? I don't think so. I really think that was a separate issue from whatever killed this engine. I think what my best guess is that this engine was starved of oil at some point in its past. And it doesn't matter how long ago you starved your engine of oil or how bad it was. If it was bad enough to cause damage, it's not going to heal itself. Engines are not like people. We can heal damage, but engines will eventually blow up given the right set of circumstances. And I think that's the best, or my best guess as to what happened to this engine. I think this engine could have been starved of oil. Maybe it was off-roading at some crazy incline and oil reached, or the level of oil reached the sump or didn't reach the sump, and then it starved once or twice. And then at some point, it had enough, and it grabbed a bearing, spun it around, and at that point, it was probably traveling down the highway. There's no way, short of having the worst chopped tires on the planet, that the driver of this vehicle didn't notice that it was making noise. I'm sure the low oil pressure light was on. I'm sure the check gauges warning came on because that's what they do. And they tried to power through. Don't do that. Don't try to power through it. It's not going to fix itself. Like I said, engines don't heal themselves. They don't miraculously fix themselves, replace the missing bearing material just as they need to. They don't do that. In this case, this engine blew up with spectacular fashion. Lots of cool carnage in this one. And I got to learn from this that the timing cover on these 3.8 out of the JKs are very expensive. So that's cool. I'll make money from selling the timing cover. And if you guys want to buy anything else out of this engine, either for your desk or your JK, or if you want to buy parts off of this Taurus, why did I buy a Taurus? A moment of weakness, I guess. I don't usually buy normie cars, but here we are. So if you'd like to buy any parts out of this Taurus or anything else that I've torn down in the past, you can go to Importapart.com, or you can peruse our past parts. Cars have been uploading our cars just about every single day. I'll also leave our email in the video description because some of these wreckage parts don't actually make it onto the website. You got to email us or call us to buy those. I really hope you enjoyed this teardown as always. I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.